Grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and listen to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life features stories to inspire and motivate you. Live your best life now. Listen, learn, think, and decide. Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. Visit cyacyl.com.
Welcome to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. I'm Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in. According to research, one of the most common reasons for teenage suicide are feelings of sadness, inadequacy, and failure caused by tremendous pressure to succeed. Today's guest, Michael Eisen, knows what it's like to struggle with teenage self-esteem and self-confidence issues. For Michael, those issues resulted in depression, anxiety, and illness. After transforming his own life at the age of 19, Michael's now on a crusade to share with other young people the principles, strategies, and practices that gave him the strength to start living a more joyful, healthier life. Michael's an inspirational speaker, author, and founder of the Youth Wellness Network, an organization dedicated to inspiring and empowering youth to live happier, more productive lives. He contributes a fresh, young, authentic voice to the field of wellness. Michael's first book, Empowered Youth, A Father and Son's Journey to Conscious Living, is co-authored with his father, Jerry Eisen, and it'll be released this October. Hey, Michael, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Michael, in the introduction, I mentioned that you transformed your life at the age of 19. What made you make this transformative shift in the way you were thinking that resulted in this new life journey for you?
Actually, the main reason that got me to where I am today, that really provided a spark in my life, was actually my father. And I'll tell you a little bit about my story and how that makes sense. I grew up in a household where I was viewed as the spirited child, or at least what the self-help books would refer to as the spirited child, which essentially meant that I didn't listen to anybody. I lived life to the beat of my own drum, had to do things my own free-spirited way. It was challenging for me because my parents, specifically my father, was extremely controlling. So he was a my way or the highway type of guy, and so obviously that didn't really mesh well with my spirited ways. So I grew up in a household where I needed to feel freedom to be able to do things in the ultimate way that my heart was telling me, yet parental pressure, peer pressure, societal pressure was saying this is the way that life has to be. You have to fit within this box. You have to follow this path. You have to continue to go along this specific way in order to get to a life that will ultimately bring you success and happiness. And so as a result, I felt misunderstood. I felt isolated. I felt alone. I mean, the theme of my childhood, I remember crying in my bedroom for years saying, nobody understands me. This carried through all the way throughout high school, experienced depression and sickness and so much stress and anxiety to fit in, to fit the mold that society claims is the successful way to go, never really ultimately feeling like that was my path. Ended up having a breakdown in my second year of university, and really at that point I had really nowhere to turn. I had no idea how to get myself out of what I was going through, but there was this faint voice inside of me that said, this can't be it. Like, this can't be all that you're supposed to experience in life. But I had no idea where to turn, and ultimately that's where really the miracle for me showed up, and it showed up in actually witnessing my dad go through a massive life transformation. And as I mentioned, he was a man who was driven by money and success and was the control type A workaholic, ran the family steel business for 30 years, wasn't really there for me much emotionally as a child. Got to the age of 50, had accomplished really all he had set out to externally, but the main thing that was missing was the internal happiness, and started himself on this radical self-transformation, hired life coaches, read something like 50 self-help books in 50 weeks, turned his car into a mobile university, listened to audio lectures everywhere he went, and within a year had ultimately absorbed so much wisdom and knowledge to turn his life around, and he decided to become a life coach. And it was really ultimately at that point where I had hit rock bottom, I started to witness the change that my dad was making in his life, and I said, well, you know what? If he can do this at 50, I got to be able to do this at 19. So I signed up, and I became his first student, and he got to learn how to be a life coach, and I got to learn all of this amazing new knowledge and wisdom that he was teaching me, different things like changing my belief systems and the way that I was thinking and the way that I was speaking and the way that I was acting, and ultimately knowing that I had the power to create life in whatever way that I wanted it to be created, not that I was a victim to the way that life was just happening to me. And so this sparked a whole new way of living for me at the age of 19. And I went on my own radical transformation journey, and with coaching with my dad and seeking out a whole bunch of other resources, ultimately within 6 to 8 months actually of that beginning step, a lot of the depression and the stress and the sickness had completely disappeared.
And Michael, we talk on this show a lot about what you just described. And one of the things that I really want to point out at this time is that as adults, often we think that taking care of ourselves and working on our own needs is a selfish thing. But what you've just explained is that we don't realize the impact we have on our children. When we take care of ourselves and we make those transformations, look at the example your father set for you. And by doing that, he was able to help you. So it really is the least selfish thing that we can do to take care of ourselves.
Yeah, and the most self-full thing that you can do. And the way I see it is that for some reason in our society, we've said that what you give to others, you get back. But we've missed the first step, which is what you give to yourself is what enables you to give to others. And then ultimately you get back. If you skip that first step, then you're giving from really an empty tank. And when you give from an empty tank, you actually start to resist the giving process, and you've got very little to give and offer to the world, to your kids, to anybody. So 100%, if we start living an example of what we want to see in other people, that's the greatest thing that we can offer our children and our youth, is to show them the way instead of tell them the way.
Michael, for generations, adults have said, oh, kids, they don't care about anything. You know, they have their head in the sand and they're uninvolved in things. And you work with kids on a regular basis. Is that the case? Are kids today going through a lot of what you just described from your life?
They're going through a lot of what I would describe in my life, but they care more than many people in our society, more than we actually give them credit for. I think the challenge is that they're so stuck in the challenges that they're going through that their response to that is to show lack of care. You know, there's two responses. There's apathy and there's rebellion. So you're going to see the apathy show up because they're ultimately living a life that they don't want to be living, but they've been convinced by outside sources that that is the way that they have to go. And then you'll see the rebellion, which is it's the fight or the flight. Then you'll see the fighting against it, but not being able to channel that fight towards a good cause. A lot of what the work that I do is being able to empower these youth to understand what it is that ultimately makes them the happiest and where their passion lies, and ultimately discovering their true purpose, and then how to actually step into that, how to break free from all those self-imposed limitations. But yes, I mean, they are experiencing challenges more so than I think in previous years and previous decades, because there's just been unconsciously a passing down from generation to generation, and this generation's different. This generation knows that, you know, there's something bigger, there's something greater out there for them. I think the challenge is they lack the tools to be able to get into that space.
I raised two boys. I have one son who's 20 and the other 17, and as a parent, we try to give our kids the best that we can. And they played baseball. And if you were a pitcher, you had to take private pitching lessons. You had to play summer ball, fall ball, winter indoor training. And we used to sit back and say, gee, whatever happened to just having fun with baseball? And then, you know, in the fall, you go play football or basketball in the winter, or you do different things. And then, you know, I put my boys in private grammar school and high school to give them an advantage. And again, I wasn't as crazy. And from what I'm learning now, thank goodness I wasn't. But there were the parents that the kids had to have the 5.0, and they had to be prepped for Yale and Harvard. And if they weren't, the kids really felt like they were failing. So somewhere as parents where we're trying to do the right thing, we're getting lost and getting crazy about it. What are the kids saying to you when they're on the other side as the recipient of our craziness?
Well, firstly, I just want to comment on that. And I think we live in an achievement and results-oriented society. And from that, we actually miss the most important part of life and the most important part of education, and that is the learning process. I think we can become so attached to the results, to the achievements, to the accolades, that we do anything at a cost to our own health and well-being. We convince our kids that, they have to get 5.0 GPAs, or if they want to get a sports scholarship to school, they've got to be practicing day and night. It's that driven by achievement, driven by results, that actually limits the learning process. And I think that is one of the biggest challenges that we face. Some of the things that they express to me is that everything from parental pressure to succeed to societal pressure to a point where actually when they become teenagers, they take it on themselves and they internalize it. Mm-hmm. And then it's an internal creation of that pressure because they've been told that they need to get those achievements from day one. They've told that, if they don't get those achievements, whether it's grades, whether it's to be the best athlete out on the field, whatever that is, they're constantly seeking that validation and that approval externally from some form of a result. And if they don't get it, then they're never satisfied. And so that pressure is coming from, if I don't get this, then this is what I don't get. If I don't get good grades, then I won't get into a good university, I won't have a good job, I won't have a good life, I won't be happy. If I don't succeed to my ultimate potential on the sports field, if I don't get the winning shot, then I will not get my scholarship into school. I will not become, what I'm supposed to become. So those achievements and those accolades are actually ultimately creating a massive limitation for these kids, and it's creating an enormous and an unhealthy amount of pressure that they're facing.
Michael Neal, he's an internationally known life coach, and he was a recent guest on Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. And what he says is he actually recommends people to live an average life, to go out and tell your kids, you're going to college, get all C's, or you're going to play baseball, strike out a couple of times. And in essence, when you do something like that, it's counterintuitive to what we believe and what you just described, but you're letting people accept the fact that, okay, I might get a C, and it's okay if I get a C.
Part of that philosophy that I agree with, but part of it I think is the missing element, is that you don't necessarily have to focus on having to get less of an achievement, but what you need to focus on is the learning process in that. I think that if our primary focus becomes, how can I learn, how can I grow, and how can I evolve? So what I do in the work that I do is I actually created a formula for a lot of these youth, and it's like, this is my purpose to life. My purpose to life is life equals learning plus growth, period. So what if all of those achievements and those accolades and those results that we're all striving for, what if all of them are completely insignificant if we are not learning and we are not growing? I ultimately believe that is our purpose. We come down into this earth, we live these human lives because we are here to learn and we are here to grow and we are here to evolve. So instead of focusing on the result and the achievement, switch your focus. Your focus now becomes on the learning. So it doesn't matter how you do on that next test, whether it's a C or an A. What matters is, what are you learning from that? Not only just learning about your own self, but learning how to take you forward in life. And the learning becomes that driving force, and then that releases the pressure. That releases the pressure from the specific result. So regardless of whether you're making the quote-unquote mistake or not mistake, there is no mistake. Because if you're learning and you're growing, you're ultimately fulfilling your purpose.
And you can take those mind shifts that you're describing and actually apply it to any aspect of your life. For example, a lot of times people are like, I have to go on a diet or have to eat certain things to lose weight. No, you have to eat a certain way to be healthy. Or you have to exercise not to have a slim body, but to have a strong heart. So you can actually bring the mind shift, like you're describing with the learning, to every aspect of your life.
100%. I mean, and I'm not just saying this applies for young people. I think it just needs to be applied to young people, because if they learn this at a younger age, then they take it with them everywhere they go. But I think everybody in our society needs to learn that, and they need to apply this idea that, we're so driven by the results that we forget to learn and grow. And if we're not learning and growing, I ultimately don't think we're actually fulfilling our true life purpose.
We need to take a break. This is Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life now has a free monthly digital magazine that can be read online or emailed to your inbox. Each month, nationally recognized leaders in their field provide the information that you need to inspire and motivate you. We believe in a holistic approach to life, incorporating mind, body, and spirit. As philosopher Francis Bacon said, knowledge is power. Use the wisdom provided in the publication and apply it to your everyday life. Visit cyacyl.com for more information or to begin your free subscription. That's cyacyl.com. Welcome back to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. I'm Joan Herman. Today's guest is inspirational speaker, author, and founder of the Youth Wellness Network, Michael Eisen. Michael is the co-author of the new book, Empowered Youth, A Father and Son's Journey to Conscious Living. Michael, you have something called Break Zone. Why did you create it, and what are the benefits? Is it something that everyone should employ?
100%. The reason why I created the Break Zone, and actually that was the first program that I created when I started my organization a few years ago, and it's based on the idea that the human brain needs a break every 45 to 60 minutes. Now that time can shift a little bit up or down depending on how old you are and depending on the level of development that your brain has gotten to. But let's just say, to use that as an example, every 45 to 60 minutes the human brain needs a break. Yet what happens is every time we don't take that break, it starts running on overdrive. It starts working harder to function at the capacity that it was before. And as a result, that creates stress. It not only creates mental stress, it creates emotional stress, and it creates physical stress. So that starts showing up in your body as fatigue, as a lack of energy, as nervousness, anxiety. It starts showing up in many different ways in the body. And emotionally, oftentimes when I'm talking about young people, you go into a high school or even at a university college campus and you see them working for hours and hours and on end, and then you see emotional breakdowns. And it's actually a norm as a result of the fact that they don't even realize that they're pushing their brain over the limits that it can actually function at. So the idea behind the Break Zone is actually repatterning these habits. And it's teaching everybody, specifically youth that I run the programs for, to take a break more frequently. And as a result of taking that break, you're not only going to reduce your stress levels, but you're also actually going to increase your ability to retain the information. So what I do is I go into schools, I go onto university college campuses, and the idea behind the Break Zone is to introduce students to more fun, alternative wellness modalities that are going to actually emotionally, mentally, physically reduce their stress. So I run stations like sound healing and meditation and mindful movement like yoga and dance, anger release and laughter. And what it does is it exposes these students to these different ways that they didn't have any idea existed previous to this, for the most part, and how to actually reduce that stress. And then what happens is they go back to their studies, they're feeling lighter, they're feeling more energy, their brain's working at a higher capacity, they're actually going to learn at a higher level and get more done.
Michael, one of the interesting things that I read is that you say that we should embrace vulnerability. And so often we perceive being vulnerable as a weakness. How can we make a mind shift and begin to embrace when we're vulnerable?
Well, that's an interesting question. Firstly, the reason why I say embrace vulnerability is that I actually think our vulnerability is our greatest asset. And it goes hand in hand with the idea of when we're taught to, at a young age, that happiness is good and sadness is bad. We start judging our emotion, and as a result, we start suppressing our emotion. So if you're feeling emotions such as shame or guilt, that's technically labeled as bad. You don't want to feel shame or guilt. So instead of actually expressing it and feeling it, you suppress it. And as a result, you're closing yourself off from feeling that. Now, if you do not embrace your vulnerability, you might be numbing yourself from feeling that shame and that guilt, but you're also preventing yourself from feeling the flip side, which is love. You're preventing yourself from feeling that bliss that you can if you embrace your vulnerability. I think vulnerability is our greatest asset because it's a big part of who we are authentically. I think who we are authentically is everything. It's not only in our greatest strength, but in our greatest weakness.
Michael, we also know the importance of gratitude. And you, again, deal with so many young people. As adults, we tend to think that kids take everything for granted and they just expect things. Do you find that kids truly feel grateful for what they have in their lives?
That's a tough question. It's hard to generalize, but for the most part, when I go into schools and when I work with kids of all ages, I would say typically in our society, there is not a level of gratitude that to the way that it should be. And actually introducing them to the concept of having an attitude of gratitude for the most part is completely mind-blowing. And for a lot of them, they don't even realize what they're taking for granted on a day-to-day basis. And just that providing that simple shift really opens up a lot of doors for them.
Michael, as you said, you go in and you work with kids on a regular basis. What, as parents and adults, do you feel that we need to do to help kids make these mind shifts and have a more joyful life?
Well, the first and most important thing is that if we are going to empower youth, we all need to live the empowered you. So what I mean by that is it's one thing to want to help and support your children. It's another to actually start living the changes that you want to see in their lives. And that's probably one of the most difficult things. It requires taking a significant amount of personal responsibility in your own life. But I have to say, speaking from experience, going through, witnessing what my dad went through, I wouldn't be here if I didn't see the changes that he made in his life. And then as a result of the changes that he made in his life, anything that he shared with me, anything that he talked to me about, just felt more real because I saw him doing it. It wasn't just him playing lip service to things. And so when he started to empower me instead of control me, which is the second thing that I would recommend, first you got to start living the empowered version of yourself. Then in your everyday interactions and communications, empower instead of disempower. So what I always like to say is give your child the choice. Don't tell them that they have to do it a certain way or have to follow a certain path. Now, I'm not saying give them the complete freedom and don't actually create any type of boundaries, but there's a difference between boundaries and limitations. If you share your own personal experiences, that's another thing that is so important as parents. Share your experiences specifically to your teenagers because teenagers need to feel that level of relation. And if they don't know what you went through when they were going, like in terms of what they're going through, then they're not going to relate to you. They see you as a completely different generation. But as soon as you start sharing authentically what you went through, knowing that you're just sharing your experience, you're not actually giving them the ideas to recreate it themselves, that in and of itself builds so much more of a stronger connection. And then the last thing I would say is state your expectations very clearly. Be very clear on consequences when those expectations are not met. But instead of saying you have to follow these rules, give them the choice. Say, you can choose ultimately what you want to do. But as long as you are living in this household, here is what I expect. And you can deliver that in a kind and supportive way. And then as a result, be strong on your consequence because if they do not meet those expectations, then they face the consequence. And that is ultimately how you empower somebody to learn the power of their own choice. Instead of telling them what they have to do and restricting them to doing it a certain way, give them the power to choose. And if they choose to learn in a way that gets them to face multiple consequences, then that is their path and they chose it. And that is way more empowering and they're going to learn significantly more from that.
The book is Empowered Youth, A Father and Son's Journey to Conscious Living by Michael and Jeffrey Eisen. If you'd like more information about Michael, you can visit his website, youthwellnessnetwork.ca. Or as always, you can visit our website, cyacyl.com. That stands for Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. While on our site, listen to past shows as podcasts, read the digital magazine, sign up for our mailing list, take part in the book club, and remember to follow the show on Facebook and Twitter. Michael, thank you so much for spending time with us. As I've said multiple times throughout the interview, I think that you've acquired a tremendous amount of wisdom at a young age, and it's wisdom that we are all hungry for. And I think that what you're doing and what you've said here today is going to help us empower ourselves and in turn empower our children.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
This is Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. I'm Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in.